Esoteric Psychology Volume 2. Treatise on the Seven Rays Volume 2. By Alice A. Bailey. Chapter I. The Egoic Ray. I. The Growth of Soul Influence. Before taking up our subject as outlined at the close of the previous volume, I would like to speak a word as to the symbolism we will employ in discussing egoic and personality control. All that is said in this connection is in an attempt to define and consider that which is really undefinable and which is so elusive and subtle that though we may call it energy or force, those words ill convey the true idea. We must, therefore, bear in mind that, as we read and consider this treatise on psychology, we are talking in symbols. This is necessarily so, for we are dealing with the expression of divinity in time and space, and until man is consciously aware of his divinity and demonstrating it, it is not possible to do more than speak in parable and metaphor with symbolic intent, to be ascertained through the medium of the mystical perception and the wisdom of the enlightened man. As is often glibly said with little real understanding of the significance of the words used, we are dealing with forces and energies. These, as they cyclically run their course and play upon and intermingle with other energies and potencies, produce those forms in matter and substance, which constitute the appearance and express the quality of the great all-enfolding lives and of the life in which all lives and moves and has its being. The unfoldment of the human consciousness is signalized sequentially by the recognition of life after life, of being after being, and the realization that these lives are in themselves the sum total of all the potencies and energies whose will is to create and to manifest. In dealing, however, with these energies and forces, it is impossible to express their appearance, quality and purpose except in symbolic form, and the following points should therefore be remembered. 1. The personality consciousness is that of the third aspect of divinity, the creator aspect. This works in matter and substance in order to create forms through which the quality may express itself and so demonstrate the nature of divinity on the plane of appearances. 2. The egoic consciousness is that of the second aspect of divinity, that of the soul, expressing itself as quality and as the determining subjective color of the appearances. This naturally varies, according to the ability of the soul in any form to master its vehicle, matter, and to express innate quality through the outer form. 3. The monadic consciousness is that of the first aspect of divinity, that which embodies divine life, purpose and intent, and which uses the soul in order to demonstrate through that soul the inherent purpose of God. It is this that determines the quality. The soul embodies that purpose and will of God as it expresses itself in seven aspects. The monad expresses the same purpose as it exists, unified in the mind of God Himself. This is a form of words conveying practically nothing to the average thinker. As these three expressions of the one great life are realized by man on the physical plane, he begins to tune in consciously on the emerging plan of deity, and the whole story of the creative process becomes the story of God's realized purpose. In the first place, as the third aspect is consciously developed, man arrives at a knowledge of matter, of substance and of outer creative activity. Then he passes on to a realization of the underlying qualities which the form is intended to reveal, and identifies himself with the ego, the soul or solar angel. This he comes to know as his true self, the real spiritual man. Later, he arrives at the realization of the purpose which is working out through the qualities, as they express themselves through the form. The above paragraphs are only a summation of what has been earlier said, but it is necessary that there should be real clarity of thought on these matters. It is apparent as we study, how this entire sequential process of realization pivots around form manifestation, and has relation to the quality and purpose of the divine mind. This will inevitably be clear to the man who has studied the theme of a treatise on cosmic fire, which deals specifically with the creative process and with manifestation. It deals therefore with the outer personality expression of that great all-encompassing life, which we call God, for lack of a better term. We need to bear in mind that our universe, as far as the highest human consciousness can as yet conceive of it, is to be found on the seven subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, and that our highest type of energy, embodying for us the purest expression of spirit, is but the force manifestation of the first subplane of the cosmic physical plane. We are dealing, therefore, as far as consciousness is concerned, with what might be regarded symbolically as the brain reaction and response to cosmic purpose, the brain reaction of God Himself. In man, the microcosm, the objective of the evolutionary purpose for the fourth kingdom in nature is to enable man to manifest as a soul in time and space and to tune in on the sole purpose and the plan of the Creator, as it is known and expressed by the seven spirits before the throne, the seven planetary logoi. But at this point we can only hint at a great mystery, which is that all that the highest of the sons of God on our manifested planetary world can grasp is a partial realization of the purpose and plan of the solar logos, as it is grasped, apprehended and expressed by one of the planetary logoi who is, in his place and term of office, conditioned and limited by his own peculiar point in evolution. A seventh part of the unfolding plan is being expressed by our particular planetary life, and because this great being is not one of the seven sacred lives and is therefore not expressing himself through one of the seven sacred planets, the plan is unfolded upon the Earth as a part of a dual expression of purpose, and only as another non-sacred planet reaches its consummation can the whole plan for the Earth be realized. This may not be easily understood, for, it has been said, only those who are initiate can grasp some of the significance of the statement that the twain shall be one and together shall express divinity. All that concerns humanity at this time is the necessity for a revelation and a gradual apprehension of the plan which will enable man to a. Work consciously and intelligently. b. Realize the relation of form and quality to life. c. Produce that inner transmutation which will bring into manifestation the fifth kingdom in nature, the kingdom of souls. All this has to be accomplished in the realm of conscious awareness or response, through the medium of steadily improving vehicles or response mechanisms, and with the aid of spiritual understanding and interpretation. With the bigger questions we will not deal. With the consciousness of the life of God as it expresses itself in the three subhuman kingdoms, we need not concern ourselves. We shall deal entirely with the following 3 points. 1. With the strictly human consciousness as it begins with the process of individualization and consummates in the dominant personality. 2. With the egoic consciousness, which is that of the solar angel as it begins with the preparation for initiation on the path of discipleship and consummates in the perfected master. 3. With the monadic realization. This is a phrase that means absolutely nothing to us, for it concerns the consciousness of the planetary logos. This begins to be realized at the third initiation, dominating the soul and working out through the personality. Man, the average human being, is a sum total of separative tendencies, of uncontrolled forces and of disunited energies, which slowly and gradually become coordinated, fused, and blended in the separative personality. Man, the solar angel, is the sum total of those energies and forces which are unified, blended and controlled by that tendency to harmony, which is the effect of love and the outstanding quality of divinity. Man, the living monad, is the veiled reality, and that which the angel of the presence hides. He is the synthetic expression of the purpose of God, symbolized through revealed, divine quality and manifested through the form. Appearance, quality, life, again this ancient triplicity confronts us. Symbolically speaking, this triplicity can be studied as 1. Man. The angel, the presence. 2. The root. The lotus. The fragrance. 3. The bush. The fire. The flame. The work of evolution, being part of the determination of deity to express divinity through form, is necessarily, therefore the task of revelation, and as far as man is concerned, this revelation works out as the growth of soul evolution and falls into 3 stages. 1. Individualization, personality. 2. Initiation, ego. 3. Identification, monad. 1. The 3 stages of egoic growth. We must hold the following statements firmly in our minds. The personality is a triple combination of forces, impressing and absolutely controlling the 4th aspect of the personality, which is the dense physical body. The three personality types of energy are the etheric body, which is the vehicle of vital energy, the astral body, which is the vehicle of the feeling energy or sentient force, and the mental body, which is the vehicle of the intelligent energy of will that is destined to be the dominant creative aspect. It is upon this truth that Christian Science has laid the emphasis. These forces constitute the lower man. The solar angel is a dual combination of energies, the energy of love, and the energy of will or purpose, and these are the qualities of the life thread. These two, when dominating the third energy of mind, produce the perfect man. They explain the human problem, they indicate the objective before man, they account for and explain the energy of illusion, and they point out the way of psychological unfoldment, which leads man, from the triangle of triplicity and differentiation, through duality to unity. These truths are practical, and hence we find today such dominant emphasis laid upon the understanding of the plan amongst esotericists. Hence likewise the work of the psychologists as they seek to interpret man, and hence also their differentiations as to the human apparatus, so that man is seen, as it were, dissected into his component parts. The recognition is emerging that it is man's quality which outwardly determines his place on the ladder of evolution, but modern psychology of the extreme materialistic school erroneously supposes that man's quality is determined by his mechanism, whereas the reverse condition is the determining factor. Disciples have the problem of expressing the duality of love and will through the personality. This statement is a true enunciation of the goal for the disciple. The initiate has the objective of expressing the will of God through developed love and a wise use of the intelligence. The above preamble lays the ground for the definition of the three stages of egoic growth. What, therefore, is individualization from the standpoint of the psychological unfoldment of man? It is the focusing of the lowest aspect of the soul, which is that of the creative intelligence, so that it can express itself through the form nature. It will eventually be the first aspect of divinity thus to express itself. It is the emergence into manifestation of the specific quality of the solar angel through the appropriation, by that angel, of a sheath or sheaths, which thus constitute its appearance. It is the initial imposition of an applied directed energy upon that triple force aggregation which we call the form nature of man. The individual, on the way to full coordination and expression, appears upon the stage of life. The self-aware entity comes forth into physical incarnation. The actor appears in process of learning his part, he makes his debut and prepares for the day of full personality emphasis. The soul comes forth into dense form and on the lowest plane. The self begins the part of its career which is expressed through selfishness, leading finally to an ultimate unselfishness. The separative entity begins his preparation for group realization. A god walks on earth, veiled by the fleshly form, the desire nature and the fluidic mind. He is a prey temporarily to the illusion of the senses, and dowered with a mentality which primarily hinders and imprisons but which finally releases and liberates. There has been much written in the Secret Doctrine and a treatise on cosmic fire on the subject of individualization. It can be simply defined as the process whereby forms of life in the fourth kingdom in nature arrive at 1. Conscious individuality, through experiencing the life of the senses. 2. The assertion of individuality through the use of the discriminating mind. 3. The ultimate sacrifice of that individuality to the group. Today, the masses are occupied with the task of becoming conscious of themselves, and are developing that spirit or sense of personal integrity or wholeness which will eventuate in an increased self-assertiveness, that first gesture of divinity. This is well and good, in spite of the immediate complications and consequences in the world consciousness and state of being. Hence also the need for the immediate guidance of the disciples in every nation and their training in the life of correct aspiration, with their subsequent preparation for initiation. The task of the intelligent parent today and of the wise teacher of the young should be that of turning out, into world activity, those conscious individuals who will undertake the work of self-assertion in the affairs of today. The mass psychology of accepting information indiscriminately, of giving prompt mass obedience to imposed limitations of personal liberty, without due understanding of The underlying reasons, and the consequent blind following of leaders, will only come to an end through the intelligent fostering of individual recognition of selfhood and the assertions of the individual as he seeks to express his own ideas. One of the basic ideas underlying all human and individual conduct is the necessity for peace and harmony in order that man may specifically work out his destiny. This is the deep foundational belief of humanity. The first developed evidence of the emerging self-assertion of the massed individuals must therefore be turned in this direction, for it will constitute the line of least resistance. There will follow then the eradication of war and the establishing of those conditions of peace which will bring about the opportunity for trained and carefully cultured growth. The dictator is the individual who has, under the process, flowered forth into knowledge and power, and as an example of the effectiveness of the divine character, when permitted scope and as the product of the evolutionary process. He expresses many of the divine potentialities of man. But the dictator will someday be an anachronism, for when the many are at the stage of individual self-awareness and potency and seeking the full expression of their powers, he will be lost from sight in the assertion of the many. He, today, indicates the goal for the lower self, for the personality. Before, however, the many men can be safely self-assertive, there must be an increased appearance of those who have passed beyond that stage, and of those who know, teach and demonstrate, so that the many constituting the intelligent group, composed of the self-aware individuals, can then identify themselves discriminatingly with group purpose, and submerge their separative identities in organized group activity and synthesis. This is the predominant task of the new group of world servers. It should be the aspiration of the world disciples today. This work of training the individuals in group purpose must be accomplished in three ways. 1. By personal, imposed identification with the group, through the experience of understanding, service and sacrifice. This can well constitute a useful self-imposed experiment. 2. By the education of the masses in the principles underlying group work, and the training of an enlightened public opinion in these concepts. 3. By the preparation of many in the new group of world servers for that great transition in consciousness which we call initiation. What, therefore, is initiation? Initiation might be defined in two ways. It is first of all the entering into a new and wider dimensional world by the expansion of a man's consciousness so that he can include and encompass that which he now excludes, and from which he normally separates himself in his thinking and acts. It is, secondly, the entering into man of those energies which are distinctive of the soul and of the soul alone, the forces of intelligent love and of spiritual will. These are dynamic energies, and they actuate all who are liberated souls. This process of entering into and a being entered into should be a simultaneous and synthetic process, an event of the first importance. Where it is sequential or alternating, it indicates an uneven unfoldment and an unbalanced condition. There is frequently the theory of unfoldment, and a mental grasp anent the facts of the initiatory process before they are practiced experimentally in the daily life and thus psychologically integrated into the practical expression of the living process on the physical plane. Herein lies much danger and difficulty, and also much loss of time. The mental grasp of the individual is ofttimes much greater than his power to express the knowledge, and we have consequently those outstanding failures and those difficult situations which have brought the whole question of initiation into disrepute. Many people are regarded as initiates who are only endeavoring to be initiate. They are not, however, real initiates. They are those well-meaning people whose mental understanding outruns the power of their personalities to practice. They are those who are in touch with forces which they are not yet able to handle and control. They have done a great deal of the needed work of inner contact, but have not yet whipped the lower nature into shape. They are, therefore, unable to express that which they inwardly understand and somewhat realize. They are those disciples who talk too much and too soon and too self-centeredly, and who present to the world an ideal toward which they are indeed working, but which they are as yet unable to materialize, owing to the inadequacy of their equipment. They affirm their belief in terms of accomplished fact and cause much stumbling among the little ones. But at the same time, they are working towards the goal. They are mentally in touch with the ideal and with the plan. They are aware of forces and energies utterly unknown to the majority. Their only mistake is in the realm of time, for they affirm prematurely that which someday they will be. When initiation becomes possible, it indicates that two great groups of energies, those of the triple integrated personality and those of the soul or solar angel, are beginning to fuse and blend. The energy of the soul is beginning to dominate and to control the lower types of force, and, according to the ray of the soul, so will be the body in which that control will begin to make its presence felt. This will be elaborated later in the section dealing with the rays as they govern the various bodies, mental, emotional and physical. It should be remembered that very little egoic control need be evidenced when the first initiation is taken. That initiation indicates simply that the germ of soul life has vitalized and brought into functioning existence the inner spiritual body, the sheath of the inner spiritual man, which will eventually enable the man at the third initiation to manifest forth as a full-grown man in Christ, and present at that time the opportunity to the monad for that full expression of life which can take place when the initiate is identified consciously with the one life. Between the first and second initiations, as has been frequently stated, much time can elapse and much change must be wrought during the many stages of discipleship. Upon this we will later dwell as we study the 7 laws of egoic unfoldment. Individualization, carried to its full, consummates as the integrated personality, expressing itself as a unity through 3 aspects. This expression of personality involves 1. The free use of the mind so that focused attention can be paid to all that concerns the personal self and its aims. This spells personality success and prosperity. 2. The power to control the emotions and yet have the full use of the sensory apparatus to sense conditions, to feel reactions, and to bring about contact with the emotional aspects of other personalities. 3. The capacity to touch the plane of ideas and to bring them through into consciousness. Even if these are later subordinated to selfish purpose and interpretation, the man can, however, be in touch with that which can be spiritually cognized. The free use of the mind presupposes its growing sensitivity to intuitional impression. 4. The demonstration of many talents, powers and the working out of genius, and the emphatic bending of the whole personality to the expression of some one of these powers. There is often an extreme versatility and an ability to do many outstanding things noticeably well. 5. The physical man is frequently a wonderfully sensitive instrument of the inner, emotional and mental selves, and gifted with great magnetic power. There is often resilient, though never robust, bodily health, and great charm and personal outer gifts. A study of the outstanding individuals in all fields of world expression today, when entirely divorced from the higher group concepts and the constant spiritual aspiration to serve humanity, will indicate the nature of the consummated individuality and the success of this part of the divine plan. It should be carefully noted that the successful demonstration of the dominant individual is just as much a divine success in its proper place and time as is the case with the great sons of God. One success, however, is the expression of the third aspect of divinity as it veils and hides the soul, and the other is the expression of 2 aspects of divinity, the second and the third, as they veil and hide the life aspect of the monad. When this is grasped, our evaluation of world achievement will undergo change, and we will see life more truly and divorced from the glamour which distorts our vision and the vision of the great personalities as well. It should also be borne in mind that individual separative success is in itself an evidence of soul activity, for every individual is a living soul, actuating the lower sheaths of bodies, and proceeding to 1. Build sheath after sheath, life after life, that will be increasingly adequate to its own expression. 2. Produce that sensitivity in the sheaths, sequentially and finally simultaneously, which will enable them to respond to an ever-increasing sphere or measure of divine influence. 3. Integrate the 3 sheaths into a unity which for 3 and sometimes 7 lives, occasionally 11 lives, will function as a dominant personality in some field of wide expression, using the energy of ambition to bring this about. 4. Reorient the lower individual self so that the realm of its desires and the satisfaction of personality achievement will eventually be relegated to their rightful place. 5. Galvanize the self-assertive man into that realization of new achievements which will direct his steps onto the path of discipleship and eventually on to the path of initiation. 6. Substitute for past, necessarily self-interested and personal ambition, the needs of the group and the goal of world service. Is not the above sufficiently practical? Initiation carried to its consummation, as far as humanity is concerned, produces the liberated master of the wisdom, free from the limitations of the individual, garnering the fruits of the individualization process and functioning increasingly as the solar angel, because focused primarily in the inner spiritual body. Awareness of the presence is thus steadily developed. This fact merits the deep study and meditation of all disciples. As the three rays which govern the lower triplicity blend and synthesize and produce the vital personality, and as they in their turn dominate the ray of the dense physical body, the lower man enters into a prolonged condition of conflict. Gradually and increasingly, the soul ray, the ray of persistent and magnetic grasp, as it is occultly called, begins to become more active. In the brain of the man who is a developed personality, an increased awareness of vibration is set up. There are many degrees and stages in this experience, and they cover many lives. The personality ray and the egoic ray at first seem to clash, and then later a steady warfare is set up with the disciple as the onlooker and dramatic participator. Arjuna emerges into the arena of the battlefield. Midway between the two forces he stands, a conscious tiny point of sentient awareness and of light. Around him and in him and through him the energies of the two rays pour in conflict. Gradually, as the battle continues to rage, he becomes a more active factor, and drops the attitude of the detached and uninterested onlooker. When he is definitely aware of the issues involved, and definitely throws the weight of his influence, desires, and mind onto the side of the soul, he can take the first initiation. When the ray of the soul focuses itself fully through him, and all his centers are controlled by that focused soul ray, then he becomes the transfigured initiate, and takes the third initiation. The ray of the personality is occultly extinguished, or absorbed by the ray of the soul, and all the potencies and attributes of the lower rays become subsidiary to and colored by the soul ray. The disciple becomes a man of God, a person whose powers are controlled by the dominant vibration of the soul ray and whose inner, sensitive mechanism is vibrating to the measure of that soul ray which, in its turn, is being itself reoriented to, and controlled by, the monadic ray. The process then repeats itself. 1. The many rays which constitute the lower separative man are fused and blended into the three personality rays. 2. These are, in their turn, fused and blended into a synthetic expression of the dominant self-assertive man, the personal self. 3. The personality rays then become one ray and in their turn become subservient to the dual ray of the soul. Again, therefore, three rays are blended and fused. 4. The soul rays dominate the personality and the three become again the one, as the dual ray of the soul and the blended ray of the personality vibrate to the measure of the highest of the soul rays, the ray of the soul's group, which is ever regarded as the true egoic ray. 5. Then, in time, the soul ray begins, at the third initiation, to blend with the ray of the monad, the life ray. The higher initiate is therefore a dual and not a triple expression. 6. In time, however, this realized duality gives place to the mysterious, indescribable process called identification, which is the final stage of soul unfoldment. It is useless to say more, for what might be said could only be comprehended by those preparing for the fourth initiation, and this treatise is written for disciples and initiates of the first degree. In these successive stages we can glimpse the vision of what we are and may be. Steadily the unfolding purpose of our own souls, those angels of persistent and undying love, should gain fuller and deeper control over each of us, and this, at any personal cost and sacrifice, should be our steadfast aim. For this, in truth and sincerity, we should strive. We have thus touched upon the three great divisions which mark the soul's progress towards its goal. Through the process of individualization, the soul arrives at a true self-consciousness and awareness in the three worlds of its experience. The actor in the drama of life masters his part. Through the process of initiation, the soul becomes aware of the essential nature of divinity. Participation in full consciousness with the group and the absorption of the personal and individual into the whole characterize this stage on the path of evolution. Finally comes that mysterious process wherein the soul becomes so absorbed into that supreme reality and synthesis through identification that even the consciousness of the group fades out, except when deliberately recovered in the work of service. Naught is then known save deity, no separation of any part, no lesser syntheses, and no divisions or differentiations. During these processes it might be stated that three streams of energy play upon the consciousness of the awakening man. A. The energy of matter itself, as it affects the consciousness of the inner spiritual man, who is using the form as a medium of expression. B. The energy of the soul itself, or of the solar angel, as that energy pours forth upon the vehicles and produces reciprocal energy in the solar form. C. The energy of life itself, a meaningless phrase, and one that only initiates of the third initiation can grasp, for even the discoveries of modern science give no real idea as to the true nature of life. Life or essential energy is more than the activity of the atom, or of that living principle which produces self-perpetuation, reproduction, motion, growth, and that peculiar something which we call livingness. It may be possible to create, or produce the lowest or third aspect of life in the scientific laboratories so-called, but to reproduce or create the other and more essential aspects which work out as the conscious response, the intelligent embryonic purpose which seems to animate all substances, that is not possible. When the third initiation is reached, man will understand why this impossibility exists. More cannot be said, for until that initiation is experienced it would not be understood. To bring more light upon this question of the triple expansion of consciousness, for all these crises are aspects of one great unfolding purpose or process, which we call individualization, initiation, and identification, it should be borne in mind that these words connote something to us today, from the angle of our present point in evolution, from our inherited teaching and thought habits, and from the standpoint of modern knowledge and terminologies. Later they may appear in a totally different light when we know more and the race has advanced further into the light. But from the light which streams forth from that larger synthesis, and from the angle of vision of those whose consciousness is higher and greater and more inclusive than the human, the significance of these words may appear totally different. Definition is simply the expression of the immediate understanding of a human mind. But a definition may later be seen to be imperfect and even false, from the angle of a wider knowledge and a more inclusive grasp of wholes, just as is the case with a so-called fact. Hence all definition, and eventually all facts, will be known to be temporary. All exegesis is but passing in its usefulness. The basic truths of today may be seen later as simply aspects of still greater truths, and when the greater truth is grasped, the significance and the interpretation of its formerly important part is seen to be widely different to what has supposed. This must never be forgotten by any who may read this treatise on the seven rays. An initiate, reading the three words we have been considering, has a very different idea about them than has a disciple or a person who has never thought or studied along these lines, and to whom our vocabulary is novel and strange, conveying little meaning, and that usually quite incorrect. In individualization, the life of God which has been subjected to the processes of growth, stimulation and development in the three lower kingdoms, becomes focused in the fourth kingdom in nature, the human, through the agency of a cycle of crisis, and becomes subjected to the influence of soul energy in one of the seven ray aspects. The quality of the form aspect, as embodied in the personality and expressed by the phrase, the ray of the personality, becomes subject to the quality of the egoic ray. Those two great influences play upon and affect each other, interacting all the time, producing modifications and changes until, slowly and gradually, the ray of the personality becomes less dominant, and the ray of the soul steadily assumes prominence. Eventually it will be the soul ray that will be expressed, and not the form ray. This personality or form ray then becomes simply the medium of expression through which the quality of the soul can make its presence felt in full power. Something of this idea is conveyed in the ancient occult phrase, "The lesser fire must be put out by the greater light." A symbol of this can be seen in the power of the sun apparently to put out a little fire when it can pour its heat right into it. It was earlier pointed out that we can profitably use the words, life, quality, appearance, in lieu of spirit, soul and body, for they express the same truth. The quality of matter, built up into human form and indwelt by the soul or solar angel, is that which normally colors the appearance. Later, this inherent quality of the appearance changes, and it is the quality nature of deity, as expressed in the soul, which obliterates the quality of the forms. During the stage wherein it is the quality of matter which is the paramount influence, that material radiance makes itself felt in a triple form. These, from the angle of the entire sweep of the evolutionary process, and as far as the human personality is concerned, appear sequentially, and qualify the matter aspect with its three major presentations. 1. The quality of physical substance. During this stage of development, the man is almost entirely physical in his reactions and completely under the ray of his physical body. This is the correspondence in man to the Lemurian epoch and to the period of pure infancy. 2. The quality of the astral body. This governs the individual for a very long period, and still governs, more or less, the masses of men. It corresponds to the Atlantean period and to the stage of adolescence. The ray of the astral body is of very great power. 3. The quality of the mental body. This, as far as the race is concerned, is just beginning to wax in power in this Aryan race to which this era belongs. It corresponds to the stage of maturity in the individual. The ray of the mind has a very close relation to the solar angel, and there is a peculiar affiliation between the angel of the presence and the mental man. It is this deep-seated, though oft unrecognized, interplay and cultivated intercourse, which produces the at-one ment between the soul and its mechanism, man in the three worlds. From the angle of these three ray influences, we have, in the life of the aspirant, a recapitulation of the triple process which we could call the processes of unfoldment of the Lemurian, Atlantean, and Aryan consciousness. On the path of probation, the ray of the physical body must become subordinated to the potencies emanating from those soul rays which stream forth from the outer tier of petals in the egoic lotus. See a treatise on cosmic fire. These are the knowledge petals. On the path of discipleship, the astral body is brought into subjection by the ray of the soul as it pours through the second tier of petals, the love petals. Upon the path of initiation, until the third initiation, the ray of the mental body is subdued by the force of the petals of sacrifice, found in the third tier of petals. Thus the three aspects of the personality are brought into subjection by the energy emanating from the 9 petals of the egoic lotus. After the third initiation, the whole personality, composed of the three aspects, becomes sensitive to the energy of pure electric fire or life, as it pours through the closed bud at the heart of the egoic lotus. The value of the above information consists in the fact that it gives, symbolically, a synthetic picture of man's unfoldment and higher relations. Its danger consists in the capacity of the human intellect to separate and divide, so that the process is regarded as proceeding in successive stages, whereas in reality there is often a paralleling activity going on, and much overlapping, fusing and interrelating of aspects, of rays and of processes, within the time cycle. Such is the program for humanity, as it concerns the unfoldment of the human consciousness. The whole emphasis of the entire evolutionary process is, in the last analysis, placed upon the development of conscious, intelligent awareness in the life animating the various forms. The exact state of awareness is contingent upon the age of the soul. Yet the soul has no age from the standpoint of time, as humanity understand it. It is timeless and eternal. Before the soul there passes the kaleidoscope of the senses, and the recurring drama of outer phenomenal existence, but throughout all these occurrences in time and space, the soul ever preserves the attitude of the onlooker and of the perceiving observer. It beholds and interprets. In the early stages, when the Lemurian consciousness characterizes the phenomenal man, that fragmentary aspect of the soul which indwells and informs the human form, and which gives to the man any real human consciousness which may be present, is inert, inchoate and unorganized. it is devoid of mind as we understand it, and is distinguished only by a complete identification with the physical form and its activities. This is the period of slow tamasic reactions to suffering, joy, pain, to the urge and satisfaction of desire, and to a heavy subconscious urge to betterment. Life after life passes, and slowly the capacity for conscious identification increases, with a growing desire for a larger range of satisfactions. The indwelling and animating soul becomes ever more deeply hidden, the prisoner of the form nature. The entire forces of the life are concentrated in the physical body, and the desires then expressed are physical desires. At the same time, there is a growing tendency towards more subtle desires, such as the astral body evokes. Gradually, the identification of the soul with the form shifts from the physical to the astral form. There is nothing present at this time which could be called a personality. There is simply a living, active physical body, with its wants and desires, its needs and its appetites, accompanied by a very slow yet steadily increasing shift of the consciousness out of the physical into the astral vehicle. When this shift, in course of time, has been successfully achieved, then the consciousness is no longer entirely identified with the physical vehicle, but it becomes centered in the astral emotional body. Then the focus of the soul's attention, working through the slowly evolving man, is in the world of desire, and the soul becomes identified with another response apparatus, the desire or astral body. His consciousness then becomes the Atlantean consciousness. His desires are no longer so vague and inchoate. They have hitherto been concerned with the basic urges or appetites, first, his urge to self-preservation. Then to self-perpetuation through the urge to reproduce, and next, to economic satisfaction. At this stage we have the state of awareness of the infant and the raw savage. Gradually, however, we find a steadily growing inner realization of desire itself, and less emphasis upon the physical satisfactions. The consciousness slowly begins to respond to the impact of the mind and to the power to discriminate and choose between various desires. The capacity to employ time somewhat intelligently begins to make its presence felt. The more subtle pleasures begin to make their appeal. Man's desires become less crude and physical. The emerging desire for beauty begins to appear, and a dim sense of aesthetic values. His consciousness is becoming more astral mental, or kama manasic, and the whole trend of his daily attitudes, or his modes of living, and of his character begins to broaden, to unfold, and to improve. Though he is still ridden by unreasoning desire most of the time, yet the field of his satisfactions and of his sense urges are less definitely animal and more definitely emotional. Moods and feelings come to be recognized, and a dim desire for peace and the urge to find that nebulous thing called happiness begin to play their part. This corresponds to the period of adolescence and to the state of consciousness called Atlantean. It is the condition of the masses at this present time. The bulk of human beings are still Atlantean, still purely emotional in their reactions and in their approach to life. They are still governed predominantly by selfish desires and by the calls of the instinctual life. Our Earth humanity is still in the Atlantean stage, whereas the intelligentsia of the world, and the disciples and aspirants, are passing rapidly out of this stage, for they reached individualization on the moon chain, and were the Atlanteans of past history. Workers in the world today should have these facts and sequences most carefully in mind, if they are rightly to appreciate the world problem, and correctly guide and teach the people. They should realize that, speaking generally, there is little true mentality with which to work when dealing with the submerged masses, that they need to be oriented towards the truly desirable, more than towards the truly reasonable, and the right direction of the energy of desire, as it expresses itself in the untutored, easily swayed masses, should be the effort of all who teach. In the more advanced people of the world today, we have the functioning of the mind-body. This is to be found in a large scale in our Western civilization. The energy of the ray of the mental body begins to pour in, and slowly to assert itself. As this happens, the desire nature is brought under control, and consequently the physical nature can become more definitely the instrument of mental impulses. The brain consciousness begins to organize and the focus of energies begins to shift gradually out of the lower centers into the higher. Mankind is developing the Aryan consciousness, and is reaching maturity. In the more advanced people of the world, we have also the integration of the personality and the emergence into definite control of the personality ray. With its synthetic, coherent grip of the three bodies and their fusing into one working unit. Later, the personality becomes the instrument of the indwelling soul. The above is a simple and direct statement of a long and difficult evolutionary unfoldment. Its very simplicity will indicate that we have only dealt with the broad outlines, and have ignored the infinite detail of process. The work starts at individualization, and continues through the two final stages of initiation and identification. These three stages mark the progress of the soul consciousness from that of identification with the form to that of identification with the self. These three words, individualization, initiation and identification, cover the whole process of man's career from the time he emerges into the human kingdom till he passes out of it at the third initiation, and functions freely in the fifth kingdom, the kingdom of God. By that time, he has learnt that consciousness is free and unlimited, and can function in form or out of form according to the behest of the soul, or as the plan can best be served. The soul is then in no way conditioned by form. Just as man can express himself in what is called three-dimensional living, so, by the time he takes the third initiation, he can function actively and consciously in four dimensions, and in the final stages of the path of initiation he becomes active fifth-dimensionally. As we consider these various degrees of expanding awareness, the significant fact to be borne in mind is that through it all there is one steady, sequential unfoldment taking place. The life of the soul, in this great life cycle which we call human incarnation, passes on the phenomenal plane through all the stages with the same direction, power, steadiness in growth and in the adaptability of form to circumstance and environment, as does the life of God as it flows through the various kingdoms in nature from age to age. The thread of the unfolding consciousness can be traced with clarity in all. Forms are built, used and discarded. Cycles of lives bring the forms into certain phases of unfoldment needed by the progressively inclusive consciousness. Other and later cycles demonstrate the definite and specific effects of this developed consciousness, for some lives are predominantly fruitful in producing causes, which is a paradoxical sentence with deep meaning, and others in working off the effects of the earlier initiated causes. This is a point not often emphasized. Still later cycles of lives bring these two aspects, consciousness and form, into a greater rapport, and thus produce an entirely different type of life. The correspondence to these cycles can be seen working out in the life and consciousness of the planetary logos, as that great life seeks expression through the medium of the four kingdoms in nature. However, and this is the fact of supreme importance, all this activity, all this directed unfoldment, all this evolving purpose and livingness, all the events in all the kingdoms of nature, and all the phases of life conditioning in the human family, plus the kaleidoscope of events, the emergence of characteristics and tendencies, the appearance of forms with their unique coloring, qualities and activities, the syntheses and fusions, the urges, instincts and aspirations, the manifested loves and hates, as expressions of the great law of attraction and repulsion. The producing of civilizations, of the sciences and arts in all their wonder and beauty, all this is but the expression of the will to be of certain beings or lives. Their consciousness so far transcends the human that only the initiate of high degree can enter into their true plan. What we see today is only the expression of their energies in the processes of form-making and of the evolution of consciousness. The plan, as it is sensed by the world disciples, in the attempt to work and cooperate with it, is only the sensing of that portion of it which concerns the human consciousness. We have not yet been able to catch even a glimmer of the vastness of the synthetic plan for evolutions other than human, both superhuman and subhuman, nor can we grasp the fabric of God's ideal as it underlies the sum total of the manifested processes, even upon our little planet. All we really know is the fact of the plan, and that it is very good, that we are enfolded within it and subject to it. Herein may be found a clue to the difficult problem of free will. It might be said that within the limits of the intelligent direction of the intelligent man there is free will, as far as activity in the human kingdom is concerned. Where no mind activity is present and where there is no power to discriminate, to analyze and to choose, there is no free will. Within the vaster processes of the plan, however, as it includes the entire planetary evolution, there is, for the tiny unit, man, no free will. He is subject, for instance, to what we call acts of God, and before these he is helpless. He has no choice and no escape. Herein lies a hint upon the working of karma in the human kingdom. Karma and intelligent responsibility are inextricably woven and interwoven. As we close our discussion of the 3 steps of individualization, initiation, and identification, which mark the progress of the soul from identification with form until it loses itself and its own identity in a higher identification with the Absolute One, let us carry our thoughts forward to that point in time and space wherein the spiritual consciousness releases itself from all the categories of awareness and all differentiations, and from the final sense of selfhood, and merges itself in that sublime condition in which self-centeredness, as we understand it, disappears. We shall later consider the stages wherein the soul, impelled thereto by its peculiar ray qualities, appropriates to itself, for purposes of experience, those forms which can be expressive of, and responsive to, the many types of divine awareness. It should be noted here, therefore, that there are, literally, 2 points of identification in the long experience of the soul. One marks the stage wherein form, matter, substance, time and space are controlling factors, and imprison the soul within their types of consciousness. This connotes identification with form life. The other connotes identification with all that lies outside of form expression and is released from it. What that may be lies beyond the grasp of our present advanced humanity, and is only known in its true significance by such great existences as the Christ, the Buddha and those of analogous rank in the hierarchy of lives. The qualities generated and developed through the first of these identifications persist and color the conscious realization, and it must be remembered that the final identification is the result of the experience gained through the medium of the first. These qualities will vary according to the dominance of one or other of the ray energies, but there will be, in the final stages, no consciousness of quality or ray type, but simply a state of being or of livingness that realizes identification with the whole and which, at the same time, holds in solution, if one may use so unsatisfactory a term, all the results of the lesser identifications, the various differentiations and distinctions, and the many ray instincts, impulses, and intuitions. The garnered and expressed qualities, and the possible actions and reactions and awarenesses are equally eternally present and capable of reacquisition at will, but they are all held below the threshold of consciousness. Livingness, being, wholeness and unity are the distinctive characteristics of this highly evolved stage, which is, in its turn, the foundation for that higher evolutionary cycle of which we know nothing but which is hinted at in a treatise on cosmic fire and in all references to the 7 paths which open up before the adept of the 5th initiation. Absorption into the One Life is the nature of this elevated state of consciousness. Freedom from all that is implied in the use of the words form and ego is the major characteristic, and, therefore, many ancient scriptures, when attempting to deal with and explain this supernormal and superlative condition, are forced back into the use of negatives, and the so-called doctrine of negation. Only by indicating what this state or condition of awareness is not, can any idea be conveyed of what it essentially is. The negations thus met with, and frequently misunderstood by the Occidental reader, are, therefore, the result of the futility and inadequacy of language to express the reality then known. After the major initiations are undergone, the state of consciousness of the illumined and liberated adept is such that language serves only to blind and to hinder true understanding. The consciousness of the initiate is of so lofty a nature that it can only be described in terms of release, of negation, and through the emphasis of that which it is not. It is a state of no thing and non-ego, for all egoic awareness is superseded by a state of being and of consciousness which is only capable of comprehension and expression when form life is of no further use to the perfected spiritual life. It is a state of non-individuality, yet with the subconscious knowledge and gains of the individual experience. The center of consciousness is so far removed from any individual separate identity that that particular factor has faded entirely out, and only the macrocosmic life is sentiently realized. It is a state of non-activity from our present angle of vision, because all individual reactions to the activity of matter or to that state of being which we call egoic, have dropped away, and life and mind can no longer be swept into motion by any of the factors which have hitherto produced what we have called soul activity and form existence. Nevertheless, though the consciousness is other than all that has been hitherto known, and though it can only be expressed in terms of negation, the truth must be borne constantly in mind that the greater awareness must always include the lesser awarenesses. Consequently, all possible actions and reactions, identifications and focusings, awarenesses and contacts, ray impulses, approaches and withdrawals, and all possible expressions of the divine activity and qualities, phenomenal and non-phenomenal, are included in the state of being which is now the natural state of the liberated and enlightened spiritual existence. All are possible of recovery through the will or in response to a need, but the spiritual being is no longer held by them or identified with them. Each of the stages on the great path of liberation or enlightenment with which we have been concerned, individualization, initiation and identification, have led the life or the spiritual, interior man, from point to point, from quality to quality, from realization to realization, from phenomenal appearance to spiritual living, from physical awareness to sentient, emotional awareness, and from that to mental differentiation and separateness. He has been carried from hell to heaven, from heaven to nirvana, from the life conditioning of the personal ego to that of the group soul, and thence to that of the liberated state of pure intuitional life. He has passed from form experience as a whole to that complete freedom from all vibratory impressions which it is the nature of pure being, divorced from phenomenal existence, to demonstrate. But at the same time, nothing is lost of capacity, or quality or of sentient awareness. This is beautifully expressed for us in the words of the old commentary, found in the archives of the Masters. The quality of life fades out. It flickers and is gone. Yet the Blessed Ones reveal at will that quality. The color pure remains. The nature of life in form fails to appear. It flashes forth a little while, then disappears. The Blessed Ones, at will, can take a form, yet are not then the form. The seven great rays sweep into manifested life. They are, and then are not. All is and all is not. But the Blessed Ones at any time can sweep forth into manifested light. They carry then the potencies of spirit to meet the need expressed. Light holds them not, their purpose is not imprisoned, their will is not subdued. They appear and disappear at will. An expression of the truth of this can be seen demonstrating in the world each full moon of May, when the Buddha flashes forth into manifestation, for the fulfillment of the plan and at the urgent behest of his own spiritual will. Naught holds the Blessed Ones. Neither the deities nor form, neither desire nor mind, nor any quality of life. Pure life they are, pure being and pure will, pure love and pure intent. This is all that unenlightened man can grasp, and only that in part. The Blessed Ones are not, and yet they are. The Blessed Ones know not, and yet know all. The Blessed Ones love not, yet offer love divine. The Blessed Ones remember not, yet all is recollection. The Blessed Ones remain in isolation pure, and yet at will can take a form. The Blessed Ones dwell ever in the high and lofty place, yet oft can walk on earth in light phenomenal. The Blessed Ones manifest not through form, yet are all forms and all intents. Then the old commentary runs through what would constitute many pages of writing, showing that the Blessed Ones are not and yet are all there is, that they possess nothing and yet are in themselves the expression of all reality, that they dwell nowhere and yet are found everywhere, that they have faded out and yet are shining in full radiance and can be seen. Negation after negation is piled up, only promptly to be contradicted in an effort to show how divorced from, and yet inclusive of, form is the life of the Blessed Ones. It ends with the wonderful injunction. Therefore be full of joy, O pilgrim on the way towards enlightened being, for gain and loss are one. Darkness and light eternally reveal the true. Love and desire eternally invoke the life. Naught disappears but pain. Nothing remains but bliss, the bliss of knowledge true, of contact real, of light divine, the way to God. Such is the true goal, as yet unrealizable by us. What is it that we are endeavoring to do? We are treading the way of release, and on that way, all drops from our hands. Everything is taken away, and detachment from the world of phenomenal life and of individuality is inevitably forced upon us. We are treading the way of loneliness, and must learn eventually that we are essentially neither ego nor non-ego. Complete detachment and discrimination must finally lead us to a condition of such complete aloneness that the horror of the great blackness will settle down upon us. But when that pall of blackness is lifted and the light again pours in, the disciple sees that all that was grasped and treasured, and then lost and removed, has been restored, but with this difference, that it no longer holds the life imprisoned by desire. We are treading the way that leads to the mountain-top of isolation, and will find it full of terror. Upon that mountain-top we must fight the final battle with the dweller on the threshold, only to find that that too is an illusion. That high point of isolation and the battle itself are only illusions and figments of unreality. They are the last stronghold of the ancient glamour, and of the great heresy of separateness. Then we, the beatific ones, will eventually find ourselves merged with all that is, in love and understanding. The isolation, a necessary stage, is itself but an illusion. We are treading the way of purification, and step by step all that we cherish is removed: lust for form life, desire for love, and the great glamour of hatred. These disappear and we stand purified and empty. The distress of emptiness is the immediate result. It grips us and we feel that the price of holiness is too high. But, standing on the way, suddenly the whole being is flooded with light and love, and the emptiness is seen as constituting that through which light and love may flow to a needy world. The purified one can dwell then in that place where dwell the blessed lords, and from that place go forth to illumine the world of men and of the deities. There are 4 ways which stretch before the disciples of the Lord of the world. They must all be trodden before the inner being is released, and the liberated Son of God can enter, at will, what are symbolically called, the 4 gates into the city of Shambhala, that city of the Most High God, which is ever swept by the life of those who have achieved liberation through loneliness, detachment, isolated unity, and purification. A realization of the goal and the way to that goal is of service at this time, and it is to this realization that the teachers of humanity seek to stimulate the sons of God. According to the ray type or quality, so will be the reaction of the life to the great stages of individualization, initiation, and identification. This is a major occult platitude, but it is one that is much in need of consideration and reflection. Let us bear in mind always that we are considering qualities which govern appearances and express the life. What is called in the Eastern literature, the Blessed One, refers to one who is perfectly expressing some ray quality through some chosen phenomenal appearance, which is assumed at will for purpose of service, but which in no way constitutes a limitation and in no way holds the Blessed One a prisoner, because his consciousness is in no way identified with the phenomenal appearance, nor with the quality it expresses. A. Individualization and the 7 ray types. We will express the reaction of these 7 ray types to the process of individualization, which is the process of identification with form, by 7 occult statements which can, if properly understood, give the keynote of the new psychology. They state the major impulse, the native quality, and the technique of unfoldment. Ray 1. The Blessed One flies like an arrow into matter. He destroys, or ruptures, the way by which he might return. He grounds himself deeply in the depths of form. He asserts, I will return. My power is great. I will destroy all obstacles. Nothing can stop my progress to my goal. Around me lies that which I have destroyed. What must I do? The answer comes, order from chaos, O pilgrim on the way of death, this is the way for you. Love you must learn. Dynamic will you have. The right use of destruction for the furtherance of the plan, must be the way for you. Adherence to the rhythm of the planet will release the hidden Blessed One and order bring. Ray 2. The Blessed One built him an ark. Stage by stage he built it, and floated upon the bosom of the waters. Deeply he hid himself, and his light was no more seen, only his floating ark. His voice was heard, I have built and strongly built, but am a prisoner within my building. My light is hidden. Only my word goes forth. Around me lie the waters. Can I return from whence I came? Is the word strong enough to open wide the door? What shall I do? The answer came, build now an ark translucent, which can reveal the light, O builder of the ark. And by that light you shall reveal the lighted way. The power to build anew, the right use of the word, and the using of the light, these will release the Blessed One, deep hidden in the ark. Ray 3. The Blessed One gathered force. He hid himself behind a veil. He rolled himself within that veil, and deeply hid his face. Naught could be seen but that which veiled, an active motion. Within the veil was latent thought. The thought reached forth. Behind this veil of Maya I stand, a Blessed One, but unrevealed. My energy is great, and through my mind I can display the glory of divinity. How can I, therefore, demonstrate this truth? What shall I do? I wander in illusion. The word went forth. All is illusion, O dweller in the shadows. Come forth into the light of day. Display the hidden glory of the Blessed One, the glory of the One and Only. The glory and the truth will rapidly destroy that which has veiled the truth. The prisoner can go free. The rending of the blinding veil, the clear pronouncing of the truth, and practice right will render to the Blessed One that golden thread which will provide release from all the maze of earth existence. Ray 4. The Blessed One rushed forth to combat. He saw existence as two warring forces, and fought them both. Loaded with the panoply of war, he stood midway, looking two ways. The clash of battle, the many weapons he had learned to use, the longing not to fight, the thrill of finding those he fought were but brothers and himself, the anguish of defeat, the paean of his victory, these held him down. The Blessed One paused and questioned, whence come the victory and whence defeat? Am I not the Blessed One himself? I will invoke the angels to my aid. The trumpet sound went forth, rise up and fight, and reconcile the armies of the Lord. There is no battle. Force the conflict to subside. Send for the invocation for the peace of all. Form out of two, one army of the Lord. Let victory crown the efforts of the Blessed One by harmonizing all. Peace lies behind the warring energies. Ray 5. The Blessed One came forth in ignorance. He wandered in a darkness deep of spirit. He saw no reason for this way of life. He sought among the many threads that weave the outer garment of the Lord, and found the many ways there be, leading to the center of the web eternal. The forms that weave that web hide the divine reality. He lost himself. Fear entered in. He asked himself, another pattern must be woven, another garment formed. What shall I do? Show me another way to weave. The word for him came forth in triple form. His mind responded to the vision clear evoked. The truth lies hidden in the unknown way. The angel of the presence guards that way. The mind reveals the angel and the door. Stand in that presence. Lift up thine eyes. Enter through that golden door. Thus will the angel, who is the shadow of the Blessed One, reveal the open door. That angel too must disappear. The Blessed One remains and passes through that door into the light sublime. Ray 6. The Blessed One caught the vision of the way, and followed the way without discretion. Fury characterized his efforts. The way led down into the world of dual life. Between the pairs of opposites, he took his stand, and as he swung pendant between them, fleeting glimpses of the goal shone forth. He swung in mid-heaven. He sought to swing into that radiant place of light, where stood the door upon the higher way. But ever he swung between the pairs of opposites. He spoke at last within himself, I cannot seem to find the way. I try this way, and tread with force that way, and always with the keenest wish. I try all ways. What shall I do to find the way? A cry went forth. It seemed to come from deep within his heart. Tread thou, O pilgrim, on the way of sensuous life, the middle, lighted way. It passes straight between the dual worlds. Find thou that narrow, middle way. It leads you to your goal. Seek that perceptive steadiness which leads to proved endurance. Adherence to the chosen way, and ignoring of the pairs of opposites, will bring this Blessed One upon the lighted way into the joy of proved success. Ray 7. The Blessed One sought the pathway into forms but held with firmness to the hand of the magician. He sought to reconcile the pilgrim, who was himself, to life in form. He sought to bring the world of disorder in which he found himself into some kind of order. He wandered far into the deepest depths and became immersed in chaos and disorder. He could not understand, yet still held to the hand of the magician. He sought to bring about that order that his soul craved. He talked with all he met, but his bewilderment increased. To the magician thus he spoke, "The ways of the Creator must be good. Behind all that which seems to be, must be a plan. Teach me the purpose of it all. How can I work, immersed in deepest matter? Tell me the thing that I must do?" The magician said, "Listen, O worker in the furthest world, to the rhythm of the times. Note the pulsation in the heart of that which is divine. Retire into the silence and attune yourself unto the whole. Then venture forth. Establish the right rhythm. Bring order to the forms of life which must express the plan of deity. For this Blessed One release is found in work. He must display his knowledge of the plan by the sounding of those words which will evoke the builders of the forms and thus create the new." It might be of value, if here were summarized in more simple and less occult terms, the significance of the above esoteric stanzas, to express their true meaning in a few succinct and terse phrases. The stanzas are of no use unless they convey to the ray types among the students of this treatise some useful meaning, whereby they can live more truly. The individualized spirit expresses itself through the various ray types in the following manner. Ray 1. Dynamic one-pointedness. Destructive energy. Power realized selfishly. Lovelessness. Isolation. A longing for power and authority. Desire to dominate. Expressed strength and self-will, leading to a dynamic use of energy for the furtherance of the plan. The use of destructive forces in order to prepare the way for the builders. The will to power in order to cooperate. Power realized as the major weapon of love. Identification with the rhythm of the whole. The cessation of isolation. Ray 2. The power to build for selfish ends. Capacity to sense the whole and to remain apart. The cultivation of a separative spirit. The hidden light. The realization of selfish desire. Longing for material well-being. Selfishness, and subordination of all soul powers to this end, leading to building wisely, in relation to the plan. Inclusiveness. A longing for wisdom and truth. Sensitivity to the whole. Renunciation of the great heresy of separativeness. The revelation of the light. True illumination. Right speech through generated wisdom. Ray 3. Force manipulation through selfish desire. Intelligent use of force with wrong motive. Intense material and mental activity. The realization of energy as an end in itself. Longing for glory, beauty and for material objectives. Submergence in illusion, glamour, and maya. Leading to the manipulation of energy in order to reveal beauty and truth. The use of forces intelligently for the furtherance of the plan. Ordered rhythmic activity in cooperation with the whole. Desire for right revelation of divinity and light. Adherence to right action. The revelation of glory and goodwill. Ray 4. Confused combat. The realization of that which is high and that which is low. The darkness which precedes form expression. The veiling of the intuition. The sensing of inharmony, and cooperation with the part and not the whole. Identification with humanity, the fourth creative hierarchy. Undue recognition of that which is produced by speech. Abnormal sensitivity to that which is the not-self. Constant points of crisis. Leading to unity and harmony. The evocation of the intuition. Right judgment and pure reason. The wisdom which works through the angel of the presence. I could here point out a constant misconception on the part of esotericists. This fourth ray of harmony, beauty and art is not the ray, per se, of the creative artist. The creative artist is found equally on all rays, without exception. This ray is the ray of the intuition and of the harmonizing of all that has been achieved through the activity of form life, as later synthesized and absorbed by the solar angel. It manifests eventually as all that can be evoked and evolved through the power of the one life, the monad, working through form expression. It is the point of meeting for all the energies flowing through the higher spiritual triad and the lower triplicity. Ray 5. The energy of ignorance. Criticism. The power to rationalize and destroy. Mental separation. Desire for knowledge. This leads to material activity. Detailed analysis. Intense materialism and temporarily the negation of deity. Intensification of the power to isolate. The implications of wrong emphasis. Distorted views of truth. Mental devotion to form and form activity. Theology. Leading to a knowledge of reality. The realization of the soul and its potentialities. Power to recognize and contact the angel of the presence. Sensitivity to deity, to light and to wisdom. Spiritual and mental devotion. The power to take initiation. This is a point of real importance. Ray 6. Violence. Fanaticism. Willful adherence to an ideal. Short-sighted blindness. Militarism and a tendency to make trouble with others and with groups. The power to see no point except one's own. Suspicion of people's motives. Rapid reaction to glamour and illusion. Emotional devotion and bewildered idealism. Vibratory activity between the pairs of opposites. Intense capacity to be personal and emphasize personalities, leading to directed, inclusive idealism. Steadiness of perception through the expansion of consciousness. Reaction to, and sympathy with, the point of view of others. Willingness to see the work of other people progress along their chosen lines. The choosing of the middle way. Peace and not war. The good of the whole and not the part. Ray 7. Black magic, or the use of magical powers for selfish ends. The power to sit upon the fence till the selfish values emerge. Disorder and chaos, through misunderstanding of the plan. The wrong use of speech to bring about chosen objectives. Untruth. Sex magic. The selfish perversion of soul powers. Leading to white magic, the use of soul powers for spiritual ends. The identification of oneself with reality. Right order through right magic. Power to cooperate with the whole. Understanding of the plan. The magical work of interpretation. Manifestation of divinity. A close study of the above suggested phrases, showing as they do the wrong and the right major expressions of ray force, will aid the student correctly to comprehend his own ray nature, and also whereabouts he stands in his development. One of the major faults of disciples today is the paying of too close attention to the faults, errors and activities of other disciples, and too little attention to their own fulfillment of the law of love, and to their own dharma and work. A second failing of disciples, and particularly of the working and accepted disciples in the world at this present time, is incorrect speech conveying ambiguous meanings and motivated by criticism, or by an individual desire to shine. In olden days, the neophyte was forced into a prolonged silence. Speech was not permitted. This was inculcated as a check upon physical utterance of wrong words and ideas, based on inadequate knowledge. Today, the neophyte must learn the same lesson of attention to personal perfection and to personal work through the means of that inner silence which broods over the disciple and forces him to attend to his own work and business, leaving others free to do the same, and so learn the lesson of experience. A great deal of present right activity is hindered by the speech interplay between disciples, and much time is lost through wordy discussion of the work and activities of other disciples. Humanity, as a whole, needs silence at this time as never before. It needs time in which to reflect, and the opportunity to sense the universal rhythm. Modern disciples, if they are to do their work as desired and to cooperate with the plan correctly, need that inner reflective quiet which in no way negates intense outer activity but which does release them from wordy criticisms, feverish discussions, and constant preoccupation with the Dharma, the motives and the methods of their fellow disciples. B. The rays and initiation. It will not be possible for me to make clear the ray reactions to the final process which we have considered briefly, namely the stage in the liberation of the spirit which we call identification. All that is possible, even in the case of initiation, is to give the elementary stanzas which convey to accepted disciples some of the significance of the first initiation. As regards identification, the reactions of the illumined initiate are made available to his intelligence in symbolic form, but if these forms were described, they would be completely misunderstood. When the third initiation takes place and the wider open door looms before the initiate, he will then discover the meaning of that type of realization which is here called, for lack of a better name, identification. Ray 1. The angel of the presence stands within the light divine, the center and the meeting place of many forces. These forces meet and blend. They focus in the head of him who stands before the angel. Eye to eye, and face to face, and hand to hand, they stand. Will reinforces will, and love meets love. The will to power merges with the will to love, and strength with wisdom meets. These two are one. From that high spot of unity, the one who is released stands forth and says, I return from whence I came, from the formless to the world of form I make my way. I will to be. I will to work. I will to serve and save. I will to lift the race. I serve the plan with will, the whole with power. Ray 2. The angel of the presence draws the wanderer to him. Love divine attracts the seeker on the way. The point of merging is achieved. Mouth to mouth, the breath is drawn forth, and the breath is drawn in. Heart to heart, the beating of these twain is merged in one. Foot to foot, the strength is passed from the greater to the less, and thus the way is trodden. Force inspires the word, the breath. Love inspires the heart, the life. Activity controls the treading of the way. These three produce the merging. All then is lost and gained. The word goes forth. I tread the way of love. I love the plan. Unto that plan, I surrender all I have. Unto the whole, I give my heart's deep love. I serve the plan. I serve the whole with love and understanding. Ray 3. The angel of the presence stands within the center of the whirling forces. For ages long, thus has he stood, the center of all energies from above and from below. With intelligence, the angel works to make the one who is above and the one who is below to blend and be as one. With 12 clear notes, the hour sounds forth, and then the two are one. The angel stands entranced. Ear to ear, breast to breast, right hand to left, the two, who are the three, produce the merging of their lives. Glory shines forth. Truth is revealed. The work is done. Then man, who is the soul, cries forth with power, I understand the way. The inner way, the silent way, the manifested way, for these three ways are one. The plan proceeds upon the outer way, it shows itself. The whole will stand revealed. That plan I know. I will, with love and mind, to serve that plan. Ray 4. The angel of the presence stands in his beauty rare upon the lighted way. The glow of the presence pours throughout the field of combat and ends, in peace, the strife. The warrior stands revealed. His work is done. Back to back, the angel and the warrior stand, their auras meeting in a radiant sphere of light. The two are one. The voice goes forth. Harmony is restored and the beauty of the Lord of Love shines forth. Such is the plan. Thus is the whole revealed. The higher and the lower meet, form and the formless merge and blend, and know themselves as one. In harmony with all united souls, I serve the plan. Ray 5. The angel of the presence serves the three, the one above, the one below, and the one who ever is. This refers to the fact that on the fifth plane the angel is definitely met and known, and the three aspects of the higher triad, body, the abstract mind and spirit, plus the ego in the causal body, and the lower mind are here blended and fused. The great triangle begins its revolutions, and its rays reach out in all directions, and permeate the whole. The man and angel face each other, and know themselves to be the same. The light that radiates from the heart, the throat, and from the center which stands midway meet and merge. The two are one. The voice that speaks within the silence can be heard. The power that reaches from the highest point has reached the lowest. The plan can now be known. The whole can stand revealed. The love that stretches from the heart, the life that issues forth from God, have served the plan. The mind that gathers all with wisdom into the boundaries of the plan has reached the outer limits of the sphere of God's activity. That power informs my life. That love inspires my heart. That mind enlightens all my world. I therefore serve the plan. Ray 6. The angel of the presence reaches down, and, at the midway point, pierces the fog of glamour. The path stands clear. The one who treads the path and stops to fight, who wrestles blindly with the two who seek to hinder and to blind, sees the way free. It stands revealed. He ceases from the clamor and the fight. He finds his way into the presence. Knee to knee and foot to foot, they stand. Hand to hand, and breast to breast, forehead to forehead, see them stand. And thus they merge and blend. The trumpet call goes forth, the warfare is no more. The battle ends. The glamour and the clouds have disappeared. The light and glory of the way is here. That light reveals the plan. The whole is with us now. The purpose is revealed. With all I have, I serve that plan. Ray 7. The angel of the presence lifts one hand into the blue of heaven. He plunges deep the other into the sea of forms. Thus he connects the world of form and formless life. Heaven to earth he brings, earth into heaven. This the man, who stands before the angel, knows. He grasps the meaning of the painted sign which the angel holds aloft. Then follows a phrase which is incapable of translation into modern language. It signifies that complete merging which the mystic endeavors to express in terms of the marriage in the heavens, and which has been wrongly twisted into the false teaching anent sex magic. This phrase, expressed by a painted symbol, symbolizes complete unity between the outer and the inner, the objective and the subjective, between spirit and matter, and between the physical and the essential. The two are one. Not more remains to grasp. The word is manifest. The work is seen complete. The whole is visioned. The magic work is wrought. Again the two are one. The plan is served. No word need then be said. These phrases are an attempt to express some of the realizations of the true initiate when he stands, at the third initiation, before the angel and sees that angel also pass away, so that naught is left but conscious knowledge and realization. Although this statement may signify but little to us at present, it will, nevertheless, serve to demonstrate the futility of dealing with the secrets of the mysteries and with initiation through the medium of words. When this is better realized, the true work of the Masonic dramas will begin to measure up to the need. This section expresses some of the basic emerging truths which will carry meaning to the senior disciples and the initiates of the world, who are battling, at this time, in the service of the plan. They are present in the world at this time, and their work is bearing fruit, but they need at times the incentive of the future achievable glory to aid them to carry on. This treatise is, therefore, somewhat abstruse and quite symbolical. It may appear difficult to comprehend, and it may mean little to some and nothing at all to others. If the disciples of the world are truly struggling and if they are applying practically the teaching given, as far as in them lies, they will find as time elapses, and their reason and intuition awaken, that such symbolic and abstruse statements become clearer and clearer, serving to convey the intended teaching. When this happens, the angel of the presence approaches ever closer, and lights the disciple on his way. The sense of separateness diminishes until, at last, light permeates the darkness, and the angel dominates the life. 2. The two cycles of egoic appropriation. We shall now enter upon a somewhat technical consideration of the relation of the ego and its ray to the sheaths or vehicles through which it must express itself, and through which it must enter into contact with certain phases of divine experience. The foundation of what is here elaborated in relation to the cycles of appropriation will be found briefly touched upon in a treatise on cosmic fire, pages 787 to 790, and the following statements, gathered from those pages, will be elucidated in the succeeding pages. 1. As the ego or soul appropriates to itself a sheath for expression and experience, points of crisis will inevitably occur. A. The work of passing on to a particular plane for purposes of incarnation is one such point. This concerns the passing down to a lower plane, or from a lower plane onto a higher. Indications of the importance and the crucial nature of such transition can be seen in certain formulas which are used when passing from one degree in masonry to another, as in raising a lodge from a lower to a higher degree. b. Another such point of crisis occurs when the mental body is swept into activity and the etheric body is similarly vitalist. 2. Relationship between the ego or soul and the dense physical body is established when a. Matter of the three lowest subplanes of the physical plane is built into the etheric body, prior to physical incarnation, and the potential channels of communication and of exit are established. These are the main channel or line of communication found between the center at the base of the spine and that in the head, via the spleen. b. A corresponding activity takes place in the process of liberation upon the path of return in which the bridge, or the antaskarana, is established between the lower mental body, the causal body, and the higher mental worlds. When the work under the first category is accomplished upon the physical plane and its technique is understood, man can then achieve escape from the physical body in full, waking continuity of consciousness. When a similar work has taken place on the higher plane and the bridge is satisfactorily built, then the initiate can escape from the limitations of form life and enter into that state of consciousness called nirvana, by the Buddhist. This high state of being has to be entered also in full continuity of consciousness. Both these major crises in the life of the soul, one leading to physical incarnation and one producing the liberation of the soul from that condition, are, and must always be, the result of group vibration, of group impulse, group incentive and group impetus. One impetus originates in the group of souls, of which an incarnating ego is an integral part. The other is the result of the activity of the groups of atoms which are vibrating in response to, but not in unison with, that egoic impulse. In this phrase is summed up the work and opportunity of the soul, for it works towards the regeneration of matter and not towards the consummation of its own salvation. It might be stated that the liberation of the soul or ego comes about when its work of salvaging matter, through utilizing it and building it into forms, has been carried forward to a desired point. It is not primarily due to the attainment of a certain spiritual stature by the man and the demonstration of certain spiritual qualities. This desired stature and these spiritual qualities are manifested when the vehicles have been occultly saved, and matter has thus been transformed, transmuted and symbolically raised up into heaven. When the vehicles vibrate in unison with the soul, then is liberation achieved. A. The points of crisis. Just as there are 5 points of crisis in the life of a man as he achieves the goal of initiation, which we call the 5 initiations, so there are 5 similar points of crisis in the process of taking form in the 3 worlds, with 3 of more importance, the first, the third and the 5th. When, speaking again in symbols, a soul, functioning under divine impulse, comes into incarnation and undergoes racial experience in order to develop certain manifested qualities, there are 5 points of crisis. I am here speaking in terms of humanity as a whole, as mankind expresses what we call the human state of consciousness. I am not speaking in terms of an individual soul, if such a misnomer may be permitted. These 5 points of crisis mark the transfer of soul life from one race to another. Each time such an event happens, there is racial unfoldment, and the appropriation, more or less consciously, by the race of another vehicle of expression. The following tabulation shows the appropriations marking the 5 racial crises. 1. In the Lemurian civilization. The appropriation of the physical body, with its 5 senses. 2. In the Atlantean civilization. The appropriation of the astral body. 3. In the present Aryan world. The appropriation of the mental body, with consequent intellectual unfoldment. 4. In the coming race. Conscious appropriation and integration of the threefold personality. 5. In the final race. The expression, in fullest measure, of the soul and its vehicles, plus some measure of spiritual manifestation. Here, therefore, we have 5 points of crisis in the life of the individual, in conjunction with the whole, with the first stage, called individualization, in Lemuria, the third stage in our race, and a final stage at the end of the age. These stages are carried forward over so long a period of time, and are so closely interrelated, that one stage and period makes possible that of another, and only the analytical mind sees or seeks differentiation. The reflection of this five-fold experience in any individual life takes place in the following order in the life of the average intelligent aspirant, who responds to, and takes advantage of the civilization and education of the present time. 1. Appropriation of the physical sheath. This takes place between the 4th and 7th year, when the soul, hitherto overshadowing, takes possession of the physical vehicle. 2. A crisis during adolescence, wherein the soul appropriates the astral vehicle. This crisis is not recognized by the general public and is only dimly sensed, from its evidenced temporary abnormalities, by the average psychologist. They do not recognize the cause but only the effects. 3. A similar crisis between the 21st and 25th years, wherein the mind vehicle is appropriated. The man should then begin to respond to egoic influences, and in the case of the advanced man, he frequently does. 4. A crisis between the 35th and 42nd years, wherein conscious contact with the soul is established. The threefold personality then begins to respond, as a unit, to soul impulse. 5. For the remaining years of life, there should be an increasingly strong relationship between the soul and its vehicles, leading to another crisis between the 56th or the 63rd years. According to that crisis will depend the future usefulness of the person and whether the ego continues to use the vehicles on into old age, or whether there is a gradual withdrawal of the indwelling entity. There are many corresponding cycles of crisis in the life history of any soul down through the ages, but these major 5 crises can be traced with clarity from the standpoint of the higher vision. One of the ways in which the life story of a soul is charted in the archives of the masters, under the present planetary experiment, is by means of graphs, which give these crises, racial and individual. Sometimes, with the more advanced aspirants, even the physiological crises of importance are charted. The entire story of the relationship of a soul with its several vehicles of expression in the 3 worlds, is the story of the various types of energy which are being magnetically related to each other and which are temporarily subordinated to varying aspects of force, in order to produce those fields of magnetic activity wherein certain needed rates of vibration may be established. From the angle of the initiates of the ageless wisdom, the story of man, the aspirant, is the story of his response to, or repulse of, applied energies. The fact that the interplay between different types of energy results in the formation of those aggregations or condensations of force which we call bodies, sheaths or vehicles, material or immaterial, is incidental to the main issue, which is the development of a conscious response to the life of God. Small units of energy, relatively speaking, are swept into contact with great fields of force, which we call planes. According to the extent of the impact, and this is determined, symbolically speaking, by the power of the originating will, the so-called age of the soul, the potency of group activity, and planetary or group karma, so will be the response between the unit of energy and the field contacted, and so will be the quality and vibratory activity of the atoms of matter which are attracted and held together. They will thus constitute a temporary form from which can be seen as externalized and as relatively tangible, and which can function as a mode or medium whereby the soul can contact larger forms of divine life and expression. The more intricate the organization of the form and the more complex and perfect the response apparatus, the more clearly will be indicated the age of the soul and the perfected intent or potency of its will, the freer it will be from the limiting karma of an unevolved conditioning vehicle. A close study of this subject is not possible here. The appropriation by a soul of those energy units which will constitute its body or sheath, as it passes from one plane to another and from one state of consciousness to another, is a study so abstruse and complicated that only those initiates whose development equips them and whose interest impels them to work with the application of the law of karma, which is identified in time and space with substance and force, can readily comprehend the complexities of the subject. 2 words are emerging today in connection with modern psychology which have a close relation to this difficult law. They indicate 2 basic ideas with which these trained initiates work. The idea of patterns and the idea of conditioning hold definite occult implications. The workers in this department of esoteric work deal primarily with the world of patterns which underlie all the activities of the oversoul and the individual souls. Forget not that this term, individual souls, is but a limiting phrase, used by the separative mind to indicate the aspects of one reality. Patterns are, in the last analysis, only those types of energy which are struggling to emerge into material expression and which eventually subordinate the more superficial and obvious energies, which have worked their way through to the surface in the process of manifesting, to their newer imposed rhythm. Thus they produce the changed types, new forms and different notes, tones and appearances. These patterns are literally the divine ideas, as they emerge from the subjective group consciousness and take those mental forms that can be appreciated and appropriated by the mind and brain of man during any particular epoch. It might, therefore, be thought that these patterns are fundamental ideas which take shape and appear to control the way of a man on earth, as it is esoterically called, produce the conditioning here discussed. Literally and curiously, this is not so. From the angle of esoteric thought, conditioning, if rightly understood, concerns the response, innate and inherent, of matter or substance, to the pattern. It might be said that the pattern evokes and awakens response, but that the conditioning of the resultant activity is determined by the quality of the response apparatus. This quality is inherent in the substance itself, and the interplay between the pattern and the conditioned material produces the type of sheath which the soul appropriates in time and space, in order to experiment and gain experience. It will appear more clearly, therefore, as one studies this subject and ponders deeply upon its implications, that as a man advances on the path of evolution and nears the status of an initiate, the conditioning of the form, innate and inherent, will continuously approach nearer and nearer to the requirements of the pattern. It might also be stated that the pattern is relatively immutable and unchangeable in its own inherent nature, as it comes forth from the mind of either the macrocosmic deity or the microcosmic thinker, but that the process of the inner conditioning of matter is mutable and in a state of continual flux. When, at the third initiation, union of the pattern and the conditioned form is achieved, the transfiguration of the initiate takes place, leading to that final crisis wherein the two are known as one, and the form nature, including in this phase the causal body as well as the lower vehicles, then is dispersed and disappears. The early stages of human development are, as in all else in nature, apparently inchoate and formless, from the angle of the true pattern, existing eternal in the heavens. There is a physical form, but the inner, fluid, subjective nature, emotional and mental, in no way conforms to the pattern, and, therefore, the outer form is also inadequate. But crisis after crisis occurs, and the inner form nature responds more definitely and precisely to the outer impact of the soul impetus. Note this paradoxical phrase, until the astral vehicle and the mental body are consciously appropriated, and as consciously used. It must never be forgotten that evolution, as we understand it and as it must be studied by the human intellect, is the story of the evolution of consciousness and not the story of the evolution of form. This latter evolution is implicit in the other and of secondary importance from the occult angle. Consciousness is literally the reaction of active intelligence to the pattern. Today, it is as if we were responding consciously and with an increasingly intelligent purpose to the design as laid down by the master builder upon the tracing board. As yet we do not and cannot enter into that cosmic mind and vibrate in conscious unison with the divine idea nor grasp the plan as it is sensed and seen by the cosmic thinker. We have to work with the design, with the pattern, and with the plan, for we are only as yet in process of being initiated into that plan and we are not aware of the true significance of those great identifications which enabled the carpenter of Nazareth to say, "I and my Father are one." But it must also be remembered, and herein lies the clue to world unfoldment and to the mystery of past, present and future, that we are dealing with matter-substance and with forms which are already conditioned. And which were conditioned when the creative process began. The material to be found in the quarries of manifested purpose is, symbolically speaking, marble, and is thus conditioned. It is not clay or slate. It is from this marble, with all the inherent attributes of marble, that the temple of the Lord must be built, in conformity to the design or pattern. This conditioned substance must be accepted as existing and must be dealt with as it is. Such is the parable of the ages. The design, the material, and the future temple are all subjectively related, and it is this that the soul knows. For the soul is the one who appropriates the material, already conditioned and qualified, and for ages the soul wrestles with that material, building it into tentative forms, discarding it at will, gathering together again the material needed, and steadily making more adequate models as the pattern is visioned. Someday, the model will be discarded, the pattern will be seen as it really is, and the worker, the soul, will then begin to build consciously the temple of the Lord, out of the conditioned and prepared material which, for long ages, it has been preparing in the quarry of the form life, the personal life. Here, therefore, are indicated two crises in the subjective life of the soul. 1. The crisis wherein the soul, blinded, limited and handicapped by form, begins to work in the quarry of experience, far from its own country, with inadequate tools, and in complete temporary self-imposed ignorance of the design, or pattern. 2. The crisis which comes very much later in the soul's experience, wherein the soul knows more clearly the design, and in which much material has been prepared. The soul is no longer blind, and can now work in collaboration with other souls in the preparation of the material for the final temple of the Lord. The soul, incarnate in human form, places in that temple his particular contribution to the whole, which might be stated symbolically to be a stone placed in the foundations, typical of the consecrated physical life. b. A column in the temple itself, typical of the desire or aspirational life. c. A design upon the tracing board, which coincides with the great pattern or design, and which is that fragment of that design which the individual had to supply and in search of which he went forth. d. A radiance or light, which will augment the Shekinah, the light which ever shineth in the east. Three things emerge in connection with the task of the soul as it appropriates sheath after sheath for expression. 1. The condition of the substance of the sheaths which determines the equipment. 2. Responsiveness to the pattern, which is dependent upon the stage of conscious development. 3. Ability to work in connection with the plan, which is dependent upon the number and quality of the crises undergone. All this takes place as the soul passes, time after time, through the experience of physical incarnation. Later, progress is made consciously from plane to plane, and this is undertaken with clear intent. The work is facilitated and progresses with increased rapidity as the soul, actively, intelligently and intuitively, begins to work with the pattern, transmitting from crisis to crisis, each marking an expansion of consciousness, a newer reach of development and a fresh grasp of the great design, coupled with a better and more adequate equipment through which to carry on the work. In our consideration of the second part of the statement in this treatise, which deals with the relationship of the soul to its instrument, the mechanism whereby or wherewith it expresses quality, activity and eventually divinity, whatever that vague word may mean, we have to approach the subject in two ways. First, we must consider the utilization of the mechanism on the path of outgoing. Second, the utilization of the mechanism upon the path of return. In the first case, we are dealing with what might be regarded as the physiological aspect, for it is in the physical nature that the consciousness is primarily focused. In the second case, we are concerned with the purely mental apparatus, though the word apparatus is basically unsuitable. It might be well to interrupt here for a moment and deal with the idea of mechanism and divinity, for these are apt to be a materializing of the idea of divinity, particularly in the West. The divinity of Christ, for instance, is frequently illustrated by reference to his miracles, and to those supernormal powers which he so often evidenced. Supernormal powers are, of themselves, no evidence of divinity at all. Great exponents of evil can perform the same miracles and demonstrate the same capacity to create and to transcend the normal faculties of man. These powers are inherent in the creative aspect of divinity, the third or matter aspect, and are linked to an intelligent understanding of matter and to the power of the mind to dominate substance. This power is, therefore, neither divine nor non-divine. It is a demonstration of the capacity of the mind, and can be used with equal facility by an incarnated Son of God, functioning as a world Savior or Christ, and by those beings who are on the path of destruction, and who are called, by those who know no better, black magicians, evil forces and devils. Divinity, using the word in its separative sense, connotes the expression of the qualities of the second or building aspect of God: magnetism, love, inclusiveness, non-separativeness, sacrifice for the good of the world, unselfishness, intuitive understanding, cooperation with the plan of God, and many other such qualitative phrases. Mechanism, after all, implies the creation of a form out of matter and the infusing of that form with a life principle which will show itself in the power to grow, to reproduce, to preserve identity of some kind, to flower forth into certain instinctual reactions, and to preserve its own specific qualitative nature. Life resembles the fuel which, in conjunction with the mechanism, provides the motivating principle and makes activity and the needed movement possible. But there is more to manifestation than forms which possess a life principle. There is a diversity running through nature and a qualifying principle which differentiates the mechanisms. There is a general synthesis and purpose, which defies the powers of man to emulate it creatively, and which is outstandingly the major characteristic of divinity. It expresses itself through color and beauty, through reason and love, through idealism and wisdom, and through those many qualities and that purpose which, for instance, animate the aspirant. This is, briefly and inadequately expressed, divinity. It is, however, a relative expression of divinity. When each of us stands where stand the Masters and the Christ, we will regard this whole question from another point of view. The developing of virtues, the cultivation of understanding, the demonstration of good character and high aims, and the expression of an ethical and moral point of view are all necessary fundamentals, preceding certain definite experiences which usher the soul into worlds of realization which are so far removed from our present point of view that any definition of them would be meaningless. What we are engaged in is the development of those qualities and virtues which will clear our vision, because they produce the purification of the vehicles so that the real significance of divinity can begin to emerge in our consciousness. B. Certain basic premises. With this preamble, we will pass on to the consideration of the mechanism and of that which infuses it and motivates it with life and intelligence. Certain basic premises are recognized and can, therefore, be very briefly mentioned. 1. The soul informs the mechanism in two ways and through 2 points of contact in the body. A. The thread of life is anchored in the heart. The life principle is there to be found, and from that station it pervades the entire physical body through the medium of the bloodstream, for the blood is the life. B. The thread of consciousness, or of intelligence is anchored in the head, in the region of the pineal gland, and from that station of perception it orders or directs the physical plane activities, through the medium of the brain and the nervous system. 2. The directive activity of the soul, or its authoritative grasp upon the mechanism of the body, is dependent for its extent upon the point of development, or upon the so-called age of the soul. The soul is ageless from the human angle, and what is really meant is the length of time that a soul has employed the method of physical incarnation. 3. The result of this twofold hold upon the mechanism during the past ages has been the conditioning of the material, in conjunction with its own inherent conditioned nature. A form is produced which is adequate to the temporary need of the soul and which is a reflection, in time and space, of its relative age, or point of development. This, therefore, produces the type of brain, the conformation of the body, the condition of the endocrine system, and consequently the set of qualities, the type of mental reaction, and the character with which any given subject enters into life upon the physical plane. From that point, the work proceeds. This work might be regarded as an effort to intensify the hold which the divine thinker has upon the mechanism. This will lead to a wiser, fuller direction, a deeper realization of the purpose, and an effort to clear the way for the soul by the institution of those practices which tend towards right conduct, right speech, and good character. The thought underlying this paragraph links the conclusions of the materialistic school of psychologists with the introspectionist school and those schools which posit a self, a soul or a spiritual entity, and shows that both groups are dealing with facts, and that both must play their united parts in training the aspirant in the new age. 4. As the introspective method is pursued, and as we study the human subject, we discover that underlying the human body in all its parts, and constituting a definite part of the human apparatus, there is a vehicle which has been called the etheric body, composed entirely of threads of force which, in their turn, form the channels along which still more subtle and varying types of energy flow. These are, in their turn, conditioned during manifestations by the status of the soul. These threads underlie and interpenetrate the entire body and the nervous system and are in reality the actuating power of the nervous system. Their responsiveness to impacts, outer and inner, is unbelievably great. The nervous reactions of the disciple and highly developed person, whose etheric body is in close rapport with his nervous system, is beyond the average comprehension. 5. The sum total of the nerves, with the millions of nadis or thread counterparts in the etheric body, form a unit, and this unit, according to the teaching of the ageless wisdom, has in it points of focus for different types of energy. These are called force centers, and upon these depend the life experience of the soul and its expression, and not upon the body. They are the factors which condition the glandular system of the body. 6. This subjective and objective system governs the manifestation of the soul on the physical plane. It indicates to those who can see in truth, the grasp or hold that the soul has upon its instrument. It can be seen whether that grasp is occasional and partial or whether it is entire and whole. This is most wonderfully indicated in a certain Masonic grip, which marks a climax in the experience of the candidate to the mysteries. I previously referred to the main channel of communication between the soul and its mechanism as being a. The center at the base of the spine. b. The center at the top of the head, where the most important center in the body is situated, from the standpoint of the soul. There is its point of entry and exit, there is the great radio station of reception, and the distributing center for direction. c. The spleen. This is a subsidiary center and organ in connection with the heart center. It is through the spleen that a linking up takes place between the life principle, seated in the heart, and the consciousness system, interlinking all the material organs and the atomic substance of the physical body. This statement indicates that, in the location in the human body where the spleen is found, along with its corresponding subjective force center, two great currents of energy cross. These are the current of physical vitality or life and the current of the consciousness of the atoms which construct the form. It will be observed that we are here discussing the group subconscious life and not the conscious life and the self-consciousness. The spleen is the organ in which planetary prana or vitality is received and passed. This enters in through the open gateway of the splenic force center and passes to the heart. There it merges with the individual life principle. Through the splenic center also passes the conscious life of the sum total of the bodily cells, which are, in their turn, the recipients of the energy of the consciousness aspect or principles of all atoms and forms within the fourth kingdom of nature. This we cannot be expected to comprehend as yet, but the truth will be appreciated later on in the racial development. A hint can here be found as to the excessive sensitivity of the solar plexus center to surrounding group impacts and impressions of an astral kind. There is a close rapport between the splenic center and the solar plexus, as well as with the heart. 7. These two subjective and subconscious streams of energy cross each other in the region of the spleen and there form a cross in the human body, as they traverse each other's lines of force. This is the correspondence in the human body to the cross of matter, spoken of in connection with deity. Consciousness and life form a cross. The downpouring stream of life from the heart and the stream of life-giving energy from the spleen pass on, after crossing each other and producing a whirlpool of force, into the solar plexus region. From thence they are very definitely drawn together as one stream at a certain stage in the life of the advanced aspirant. There they merge with the sum total of energies, using the 3 points referred to, the head, the base of the spine and the spleen, as a definite mode of communication, of distribution and of control, and finally of ultimate withdrawal, consciously or unconsciously, at the moment of death or in the technique of inducing that stage of control known as samadhi. 8. When the directing agent in the head, deliberately and by an act of the will, raises the accumulated energies at the base of the spine, he draws them into the magnetic field of the centers up the spine and blends them with the dual energy emanating from the spleen. The spinal tract with its 5 centers then awakens into activity, and finally all the forces are gathered together into one fused and blended stream of energy. 3 things then happen. A. The Kundalini fire is raised and immediately burns away all the etheric webs which are the protective barriers, separating the various centers. B. The etheric body intensifies its vitality, and the physical body is consequently powerfully vitalized, galvanized, and energized. C. The entire aura is coordinated and illumined, and the soul can then, at will, withdraw from its physical vehicle in full waking consciousness, or stay in it as an incarnated Son of God, whose consciousness is complete on the physical plane, the astral plane, and on the mental levels, as well as in the 3 aspects of lower mind, causal consciousness and nirvanic realization. This process finds its consummation at the 3rd initiation. In the life of the aspirant, the power to cause this tremendous happening is dependent upon the carrying forward of the inner subjective and spiritual work previously described as the building of the bridge on the mental plane, between the above-mentioned 3 aspects. For the race of men as a whole, this work began in the middle of our Aryan race, and is today going forward very rapidly. For the individual aspirant, the work has always been possible right down the ages, and it is the major task undertaken by disciples at this time. It might be added here that the new group of world servers is composed of those who are engaged in this work for the race, and every person who builds his bridge joins this group of occult bridge builders. There is, therefore, something symbolic about the work of our modern bridge builders who join the chasms and span the waters and thus give concrete evidence of the work being done today by advanced humanity. It now becomes possible to consider the process whereby a man bridges the gulf or gap, speaking symbolically, which exists between the personal lower self and the higher self, as the latter functions in its own world. This has to be bridged before at one ment can be achieved and complete integration of the entire man can be brought about. To understand clearly what occurs, it will be wise to define more accurately what that higher nature is, and of what it consists. We have seen in our studies that the soul is a dual blend of energies, the energy of life and the energy of mind, as far as its relation to the mechanism is temporarily concerned. The merging of these 2 energies in the human mechanism produces what we call consciousness, at first self-consciousness and finally group consciousness. The mechanism is, in its own nature, also a blend or fusion of energies, the energy of substance itself which takes the form of the atomic structure of the physical body, plus the vitality which animates that body, and, secondly, the energy of that body which we call the astral body, distinguished by sensitivity, emotional activity, and that magnetic force which we call desire. There is, finally, the energy of mind itself. These 4 types of energy form what we call the lower personal self, but it is the higher mental aspect of the mind which links, subjectively, this personality and the soul. It is the lower consciousness which, when developed, enables a man eventually to make conscious contact with the higher. It is the lower concretizing mind which must be awakened, understood and used with definiteness before the higher mind can become the medium through which knowledge can be gained of those realities which constitute the kingdom of God. Intellect must be unfolded before the intuition can be correctly evoked. We have, therefore, in the case of man, 2 groups of major energies dominating, as a result of a long experience of incarnation in form, the energy of the astral or desire nature and the energy of mind. When these are fused and blended, thoroughly organized and utilized, then we see a functioning and powerful personality. Seeking to impose itself upon these energies and to subordinate them to higher and different aims is to be found that blended energy unit which we call the soul. Its 2 energies, mind and love, the latter being also a dual form of energy, are anchored, If one may use this word in a symbolic and esoteric sense, in the human brain, whilst the life principle, as we have seen, is anchored in the human heart. The four energies of the lower self, atomic energy, vital energy, feeling energy and mental energy, plus the two energies of the soul, make the six energies used by man in his life experience. But the energy of the atom is usually not counted as a human energy, as it is uniform in its usage in all forms of life in all kingdoms, and therefore man is regarded as a sum total of 5 energies, and not of 6 energies. The human soul, in contradistinction to the soul as it functions in its own kingdom, free from the limitations of human life, is imprisoned by and subject to the control of the lower energies for the major part of its experience. Then, upon the path of probation, the dual energy of the soul begins to be increasingly active, and the man seeks consciously to use his mind, and to express love-wisdom on the physical plane. This is a simple statement of the objective of all aspirants. When the 5 energies are beginning to be used consciously and wisely in service, a rhythm is then set up between the personality and the soul. It is as if a magnetic field were then established, and these two vibrating and magnetic units, or grouped energies, begin to swing into each other's field of influence. In the early stages, this happens only occasionally and rarely. Later it occurs more constantly, and thus a path of contact is established which eventually becomes the line of least resistance, the way of familiar approach, as it is sometimes esoterically called. Thus the first half of the bridge, the antaskarana, is constructed. By the time the third initiation is undergone, this way is completed, and the initiate can pass to higher worlds at will, leaving the lower worlds far behind. Or he can come again and pass upon the way that leads from dark to light, from light to dark, and from the lower worlds into the realms of light.